Hello everyone, welcome to Eternal Basics. My name is Pojo, and today we're going to be talking about a skill that is fairly simple to learn, but fairly difficult to master, and that is the ability to look at your opponent and predict what's in their hand. So let's get into it, shall we? First things first, let's stop doing this. So the deck we're going to be using today is a Stonescar deck, and we are going to be playing a deck that has a few toolkits to help us along in predicting what's inside our opponent's hand. But for the most part, we're going to be playing a fairly standard uncommons only control set. And I have included two rares in this deck, and they're the two rares that are included in the basic Stonescar deck that gets gifted to you after you have played for a little bit. So you'll get all 5 of these hybrid decks, and they have 2 rares in them, so I included those rares as well, because I wanted to cheat a little bit, because Stonescar has some pretty low card quality in the style that I wanted to play in for this video. But, so we use Champions of Chaos here, and Umbren Reaper. And those are the only 2 rares. The rest of this is commons and uncommons. And the basic idea behind this deck is we're playing a lot of control elements with card advantage, using cards like Devour, Dark Wisp, and Madness to generate some decent card advantage that way. And finally using Subvert as a 2-of to draw a random card from the enemy player's hand. This essentially gives us 2-for-1 card advantage, very similar to Wisdom of the Elders, because it subtracts a card from our opponent's hand. And so that's really pretty good for us, and it's also pretty good if we can use it in the right ways, and we know what kind of cards it is that we want to steal and what the likelihood it is that we're going to steal those cards. So that's part of the basic plan, and we're going to try to execute on that plan as much as we can. All right, now first things first. What we've got here is we've got Flame Blast as our main lethal condition. We usually top deck this and use it to push in for the last amount of damage that we need. Cards like Umbren Reaper, Rebel Illuminator, Torch, and Champion of Chaos all push in for extra damage. And we also use cards like Obsidian Golem, Furnace Mage, lots of things that are just mean and nasty, along with Madness. There is a combo here with Madness and Devour where we can steal an opponent's unit and then devour it to draw 2 cards, and that's pretty useful for getting ourselves up above and over the peak. At the top we have Granite Monument. Because our deck terminates at 5, Granite Monument is an excellent card for making sure that we don't go too far over 5, and also that we have lots of useful things to do at 5. In order to get to 5, however, we still do utilize some power-seeking abilities, namely Vara's Favor here, which deals a damage and draws a Shadow Sigil from your deck. Kaleb's Favor is also included. I've only got 1 of them in here, but it's okay to run 2 or 3, and that'll get you pretty close to what you want. But we only wanted so many power sources since we're trying to terminate at 5 power and keep a very tight and just very dedicated deck that only uses Flame Blasts for like 6 or 7 at the top. Alright, so in any game of Eternal, there is the stuff that we know and the stuff that we don't know. And predicting what's going to happen in a game and responding to those predictions appropriately is all about, first off, making sure that you're paying attention to all the stuff that you should know, and then using that information to narrow the possibility space of what it is that you don't know. So for all of the information that we are being given, we really want to try and figure out what it is that our opponent is playing and what kind of cards they might actually have in their deck. And there's many different ways that we can do this. Now, first off, there are the fairly obvious ones. We want to look at what colors our opponent is playing. If we know that our opponent is playing in a particular set of colors, we can make a very educated guess as to what their deck is. There's only ever going to be so many different deck archetypes in a particular color. And while Eternal is a very diverse game, and there can be a lot of different amazing meta choices, they're still going to share a lot of the same cards. And so we can guess, based on what colors they are playing, what kind of cards they might have in their hand. This gets easier once we see what kind of cards they are playing early on. So for example, if they're playing 1-drops and 2-drops and they're playing a lot of those, or if they're playing even just one 1-drop, we have a pretty good guess that this is going to be an aggressive style of deck, because control decks usually skip the 1-drops and move to like the later stuff. And if we're seeing something that's really aggressive on turn 1, it's very likely that the rest of the deck is going to be aggressive as well. So you can figure out a lot just from the first couple of plays. You can look at the cards that are played and think about what kind of synergies they have, what kind of cards they work best with, what kind of decks they work best in. And figuring that stuff out early on, taking the time, just taking your turn and thinking about what is being played, will give you a really good indicator of what's going on. You'll see this a lot with professional players and streamers, where they will basically just be calling out cards, and they'll say, oh, this thing's going to happen next, and we'll respond with this. And then oftentimes it does happen like that. It's not guaranteed, but they have a pretty eerie degree of accuracy. And that's something that comes with practice, but it's something that I want to encourage even people who are just getting started to do, to just say, like, I think that my opponent has this kind of stuff in their hand, and operate on some sort of guess, some sort of thesis as to what it is that you're playing against and what it is that you need to be playing around. Because using that information and using these educated guesses, as you go along, your guesses will get better and better, and you'll start playing better and better as a result of these guesses. I think that's a really crucial part of what's going on. There are a couple of things that we really want to specifically watch for. Namely, there is a deliberate pause in Eternal, which we've talked about a little bit before. I've talked about before how you should go into gameplay and turn off this thing, Smart Auto Pass, which automatically continues when you have no relevant actions. Now, that is to say, whenever you do have relevant actions, whenever somebody does anything that you have a fast spell response to, or an ambush unit that you can play, there is a point where you have to press continue and pass the priority of the turn back to your opponent. And your opponent gets to see that pause. That pause is always visible to someone that you are playing against, and it's always visible to you when your opponent has something to play but elects not to play it. Watching that pause and knowing about that pause is really key to understanding what's in your opponent's hand and getting a good idea of what it is that they're doing. So, for example, if your opponent has 1 red and you attack them with a 1/1 unit and there's a pause, and then your attack goes through, then that pause is a result of your opponent having a torch or a temper in his hand. Either of those fast spells are a response that he can have, or they can have rather, that will in some way allow them to just do something when you attack. And the fact that they chose not to play it means that they might be trying to save it for something else. But we know from that pause that they have it in their hand, and that allows us to make really good decisions about what to play next. Maybe we don't play that like 3/1 unit that we think is going to get torched, or maybe we like do play that because we want that to get torched so that we can play down our Umbren Reaper later on. There are a lot of things that we can do with that kind of information and that particular pause. There are other things to watch for as well. We want to watch what our opponent is drawing. We want to watch for possible echo units where the card duplicates as soon as they draw it. We want to watch for fate effects that show us things like that. And if you're getting started and you have kind of a bad memory, I actually recommend that, like, if you're being really serious about it, you can even just like take notes. And like if you see something in their hand, or you have a good idea of what's in their hand, or you have like some guesses, you can just put it down, and that'll give you a better idea if the game goes long of what's in their hand later on. And also you can like verify your guesses. There's a whole little mini game there of what's right and what's wrong. So we're gonna do 2 games here, and we're gonna talk, just show off basically the idea of predicting what our opponent is going to do. And then we'll do like a little bit of a post-mortem and talk about a little bit more about why this is important. So I will see you guys there. Hand has Obsidian, Golems, and Champion of Chaos. Champion of Chaos is a super strong card. This is a card that we really want to have more of in the deck, along with cards like Steward of the Past and Umbren Reaper. I'm really happy to keep this hand. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Alright, opponent is Gomabook, and we're going to be keeping an eye on him and seeing what it is that he's playing. Alright, Xenon Banner. Now, we already know that there's a pretty popular archetype out right now called Xenon Serial Killers, which plays white and purple. There aren't really that many Xenon decks, so it's safe to assume that that is the deck that we're playing against. Since there aren't really a lot of since there's no enemy color pairings, there's just a lot less choices here. So we're likely to see cards like Friendly Wisp, Beast Colors Amulet, Sandstorm Titan is very common here. There are a lot of different interesting choices. Now I want to play Champion of Chaos eventually, and I also want to continue to advance my power pool. So we're going to go ahead and play Kaleb's Favor instead of advancing the board. And we'll attack with Obsidian Golem. My opponent played, and you can look right here to see what he played, a Seed of Mystery that was depleted. And that means that since he played Banner first, then Seed, he doesn't have any other power in his hand. His hand is entirely full of big stuff. So if we get Sabotages and Treacheries, then we know that they're going to be safe to use because this hand does not contain a lot of power. It's very likely to have both creatures, or both units, and weapons or spells. So keeping an eye on what they play and whether or not it's depleted is super important. And you can just click there to see that. All right, this time around he played a Seed of Mystery that wasn't depleted. So it looks like he did have another seat in his hand, but he just drew a Sigil in his top deck. In addition, he just played Suffocate on us, so, you know, that's something that happens sometimes. Suffocate, it's safe to assume that he might have another one, or it's reasonable to assume that he might have another one. So let's play other cards that actually deal well with that, as opposed to playing Champion of Chaos without it being in a position where we can actually deal with stuff. Because if we play Champion of Chaos into Suffocate, we're going to be really sad, because otherwise, if we play Champion of Chaos when we have 3 red, then, well, you know, Suffocate wouldn't happen. Alright, I'm pretty comfy with attacking here to just kill something. And Granite Monument here makes Champion of Chaos a 4/4, which is pretty good. So both of those things are pretty nice. Ordinarily we'd save our Granite Monuments, but we're not making very good strides on tempo. So we're going to want to keep attacking in here. My opponent chooses to trade 1 for 1. That's fine. And we get to play Champion of Chaos. Okay, so what do we know is in his hand right now? He's played the power along with the Seed of Mystery. It's possible he's top-decked more power. We really don't have any idea what's in his hand right now, except that it's probably not something that costs 1 or 2, because we know that he's drawn power, and we know that the power that he's played was not enough to play stuff out of his hand in, like, the early turns. So he's very likely got quite a few decent bombs in there, and we're going to be seeing a lot of those in the next couple of turns. I've got Flame Blast for 1 bomb. I have Suffocate here to deal with this Scorpion, which is a card that I really want to deal with ahead of time so that it doesn't have any problems. And Annihilate is also a very good card against bombs. Let's Suffocate here. You see that pause? We know that he's got a fast spell in hand. It could be Deathstrike, so we don't want to play the Obsidian armors onto the Champion of Chaos yet. Let's just attack in. And it's a Scorpion Wasp. I'm pretty fond of my champion, and I'd really prefer that he not get killed, so we're going to Annihilate that. And because champion has Overwhelm, the Overwhelm damage is still going to happen. There's another pause here, which indicates that my opponent has a 2-cost fast spell, and that's very, very likely to be Annihilate. That's good news for us, because Annihilate can't target Champion of Chaos, so this is exactly what we're looking for. Now, my opponent is going to pause again. I can be pretty careful here and play around Deathstrike still, because there's still the possibility of Deathstrike. There's still the possibility that he's holding on to something really, really nasty. I think I'm rather in favor of that at the moment, so let's attack in. And it looks like we are going to see the Deathstrike. Deathstrike's a real common removal card in a big, meaty deck like this, so it was reasonable to expect that there might be one. I can Obsidian armor something else now, which is nice, but he's still got the Annihilate as well. Alright, and the Tormentor. Whispers in the Void isn't really anything that we're too worried about. As far as things go, I think I want to stack Obsidian armors on this guy, because that makes him into a threat that's actually pretty hard to deal with. If I stack both, then I lose out on card advantage to Annihilate, but I also force the Annihilate. It's questionable either way. I'm going to attack for 3. And he can't Annihilate this turn, of course, so... not much to say about that. I could put the Obsidian armor on here to force one of those Annihilates to come out. Ah, and it's a Ephemeral Wisp. Alright, he's going to have a very, very good defense for a while now. So let's Obsidian armor here. And we'll attack with both of these, because we're trying to force the Annihilate out now, because we want the Annihilate gone for Umbren Reaper. There's the Annihilate. And now we're pretty sure that he doesn't have any more fast spell removal. That's pretty crucial. Now, I can still win this game if he does have fast spell removal, but this is nonetheless a pretty good deal. And it ended up that he didn't actually play out a Xenon Serial Killers deck, so this is actually something different. Alright, there's 2 cards left in his hand. I kind of want to know what they are. I'm going to Subvert and steal one, because they're very likely to be gas. He hasn't played any power this turn, so we know it's going to be something decent. And we got the second Annihilate, which is good. We also get whatever the other card is in his hand, which may or may not be a power. It's a Deathstrike. So now, my Umbren Reaper is totally safe from all of the removal. Or, like, barring really good top decks. Marison's Disciple's a rough card here. Not a lot to say about that. It just hurts. Umbren Reaper looks right. He's pretty close to lethal here. But I don't think there's any way that I can play around that. We'll just play the Umbren Reaper. And we'll hope we do well enough. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I need to draw essentially... a torch would be the winner here. I think that blocking is a poor choice here because we're dead either way, so we'll not block. We need to win basically on our turn. That's going to be real hard with a 2/2 flyer in the air. That's a bummer. This was a pretty good game. Alright, so didn't win this round, but we had a very good idea of what was in his hand at all times, and we played the best we could around those cards. Go ahead and Deathstrike there. And, well, that is the game. Just go ahead and let him kill us here. Loops. Alright, we're up against Lord Fraction. This hand looks pretty good. Sabotage and Obsidian Golem are pretty sweet. Rebel Illuminator's kind of cool. I think that overall we can keep this. Can't cast the Flame Blast until later, but we have a good turn 1, turn 2, and we have a pretty likely good turn 4. Seed of Chaos, and we'll go ahead and Sabotage and take a look at his hand. His hand's empty, so I'm willing to bet that this is an Elysian deck. Blue-yellow with a lot of units. Or it's possible he just has like 7 power in hand, but it's much more likely that it's something with a lot of stuff in it. And those first turn Sabotages don't hit, you know, sometimes they happen. Oh, a Feln deck. Okay, so this is a Feln Haunting Scream deck. There are some things that can happen here. I can't do much about Swiftblade for a while now, and that's unfortunate, but if I draw into some good removal, Suffocates will be particularly important. Whispering Wind is the card that I really need to kill. I need to draw something for it as soon as I can. We didn't get anything yet. I'll Treachery here. There, with Beast Colors out. Alright. Discarding a Beast Color is pretty disconcerting because Haunting Scream is still a possibility. But if my opponent discards to get into Haunting Scream, it's probably going to have to be something very, very small. So we'll be able to predict some of what he gets from what he discards. And he decided not to discard anything, which is really interesting. A lot of ways that that's pretty good for me, I would say. I'm going to attack for 2. And I want to play Rebel Illuminator on turn 4, so yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Illuminator's pretty nice here because it allows me to trade Torch stuff with Whispering Wind and Twilight Raptor. I can block Swiftblade and kill that. A lot of ways in which that's good for me. Permafrost is mostly bad news, but if I get to Devour at any point, I will be able to get out of that. Now at this point, I'm really into keeping up the pressure. His deck's not all that aggressive. It's a little bit aggressive, but it's not so aggressive that I'm truly worried. And if I am being aggressive to him, then I can win with Flame Blasts and other things going on. He hasn't discarded anything to those Whispering Winds, which means that he's not trying to draw anything new. I'm very curious about that. At some point, he's just going to have to discard power. Okay. Discarding a Felon Banner gives him a higher likelihood of drawing Haunting Scream, or something playable that he can actually use. So there's some ways in which this is not going to go well for me. But I also have 5 damage here, which he currently doesn't have an answer for. Let's Flame Blast here. Actually, let's Obsidian Golem first. Flame Blast for 3 instead. That pause there indicates he's got some form of removal. What that removal is very curious. I'm willing to bet that it's an Annihilate or a Suffocate. Or an Annihilate, actually. It can't be a Suffocate. And in that case, he's not going to be able to kill either the Obsidian Golem or the Champion. So that puts me in a really good position. Because whatever it is he's got, he can't cast on any of the units I've got in play. A Haunting Scream, however, is still a pretty scary card. Not a lot we can do about that. Discards a Diplomatic Seal to draw into a new thing. If we'd gotten a Torch or a Suffocate, this would be a very different game. As it is, we're still in pretty good shape, I would say. So, I attack with everything here. I get 4 plus 2, 6 damage in, and then I get to play Umbren Reaper. But then I probably die to lethal damage from these guys. Oh no, that's not true, because I'll be able to block a 5/5. The problem is that if he has Annihilate, he has to cast it. So this is actually okay, right? We expect that he has an Annihilate as one of the cards in his hand. We don't know what the other card in his hand is, but it's safe to assume it's either a Haunting Scream, a Deathstrike, or something very, very scary. If I attack this way, I should force him to block with one of his 5/5s, because he's definitely going to want Champion of Chaos to be dead. So let's attack in. If he doesn't block here, I just lose. There's nothing I can do about that. But he did choose to block. And as a result, we get our 4 damage in. And now we play Umbren Reaper down. Now, importantly, Umbren Reaper only gets the damage, the 5 damage, if I don't die to combat damage. So if he finds a way to push across more than 8 combat damage, that's really crucial. But if he wants to Annihilate to get the 5/5 across, that will trigger Umbren Reaper's ability before combat damage resolves. So I will win the game that way. So you can see my opponent's hesitating here. He's got Annihilate or Deathstrike. He could draw like a Feeding Time. That would be really bad for me. There are a lot of cards that could be pretty terrible for me. But more likely we're going to win this game. The odds are, you know, all right. So, yeah, we can safely assume that was an Annihilate in his hand, and he just didn't have an out. So yeah, as you take a further step out into the world of Eternal, do keep an eye on those interesting little pauses and use them to identify like what kind of things might actually be being played by your opponent. Keep an eye on your opponent's deck, their colors, what speed they're playing at, what kind of things that you think they might be doing. All of that information will help you to win games in the future, and don't be afraid to make wrong guesses. The more that you make guesses, the more you'll be proven wrong, of course. Making mistakes is always a part of Eternal, and that is actually something that I have encouraged from Eternal Basics #1 with being aggressive. We want to make mistakes. We want to do the wrong thing sometimes and test things out and play around and really just like always have something that we're after. Have a plan, basically. And this is just more of that same thing. We want to make sure that we have a plan, and in order to do that, we're gonna pretend that we know what our opponent's plan is. And eventually we're gonna get so good at pretending that it's gonna be pretty hard to distinguish it from the real thing. So yeah, that's the basic idea behind this particular video and this particular style of play. The better you can predict your opponent's hand, the better off you are. This is Eternal Basics #10, and we've now cycled through all 5 of the basic decks and all 5 of the allied color pairings. Whether I will do opposite color pairings may depend on when set 2 comes out, but I will continue to do Eternal Basics videos. From now on, they're going to be unnumbered, they're going to be just covering basic concepts, and we'll do all sorts of things with them. There's going to be a lot of interesting different things that we can look at. So look forward to those. As of today, we're well past 1,000 subscribers. I hit 1,000 subscribers on Christmas, and I'm really thankful to you guys. I'm so delighted to be doing this, and I'm so delighted that it's taking off, and I'm really excited to keep producing stuff. So look forward to that. We're going to be doing more basics videos. We're going to be doing brew videos, tournament videos, draft videos. There's going to be all sorts of new stuff coming up, and if you want to see that stuff coming, you can always subscribe. Thank you again so much for watching, and I have been Pojo, and I will see you next time on Eternal Basics. Cheers.